My name is Chuck. I graduated from the University of California, Berkeley in 2016. My time there turned out to be everything I could have hoped for. I joined a fraternity, kept my grades in check, and spent a fair amount of time enjoying the social scene and chasing girls. Even now, I am still close with many of my old fraternity brothers, and I recently got engaged to my fiancée, Rosie, who I also met during my time at Berkeley. But if you had asked me what I thought about Berkeley during my freshman year, my answer would have been completely different. What I am about to share is a big reason why. Back in high school, I was never the type to push myself too hard. The environment at Berkeley felt completely unfamiliar. I suddenly found myself surrounded by people who constantly talked about success and achievement. As a freshman, I got caught up in the pressure of planning out an entire career and future at just 18 years old. It sounds ridiculous now, but that was the culture there at the time. If you wanted any chance in the business world, having a strong LinkedIn presence was considered essential. I still remember how stressful it felt trying to build a polished professional image online, as if my entire future depended on who I connected with and what skills I listed. Eventually, I followed the expected path and started applying for summer internships. Before long, I received a message that actually stood out. To my surprise, a well-known business firm had reached out to me, showing genuine interest in my profile. It did not feel like one of those automated messages either. The content was specific enough that it seemed written just for me. I must have read it at least 6 times before replying. After about a day and a short exchange, I was invited to a first-round interview. I spent hours researching the company, so I would be fully prepared. I went through every possible interview question I could find. Not long after, I received a message from someone named Armin Slowinski. I still remember that name clearly. He introduced himself as my interviewer. Naturally, the first thing I did was try to look him up. What started as curiosity quickly turned into confusion. I searched LinkedIn and everywhere else I could think of, expecting to find at least some information about him. There was nothing. No professional history, no social media presence, absolutely nothing. I brushed it off, assuming maybe he just valued his privacy. We agreed on a date and time, and he sent me the interview location. When I looked it up, I saw that it was a random coffee shop in Oakland. That immediately struck me as odd. Why would the interview not be in Berkeley? There were plenty of suitable places nearby. Still, the address looked legitimate, so I did not question it too much. The day before the interview, I told my friend Riley about everything. He found it even stranger than I did and said it sounded suspicious. I agreed, but I did not want to miss out on a potential opportunity. When he asked how I planned to get there, I told him I would take an Uber. He offered to drive me instead, since he had nothing else going on. I accepted without thinking much of it. Looking back, I might not be here telling this story if he had not insisted on driving me. The next day at 4 in the afternoon, Riley pulled up to my dorm. I was nervous since this was one of my first real interviews. I got into the car, and we headed out. About 20 minutes later, I asked him to drop me off down the street, so it would not look like I had been driven there. I thanked him, and he offered to stick around and wait. When I asked if he was serious, he just grinned and pulled out a large bag of weed from his dashboard. I stepped out of the car and walked the rest of the way. After a couple of minutes, I stopped dead in my tracks. In front of me was not a coffee shop, but a full construction site. There was no sign of any business at all. The entire area felt abandoned, with buildings that looked closed or private. Confused, I checked my phone again and confirmed I had the right location. It seemed like the place had been demolished so recently that even the maps had not been updated. I pulled out my phone to call Riley, but before I could dial, I heard a deep voice call out my name, Chuck. I turned around quickly and saw an extremely tall man dressed in a sharp black suit. For a moment, I felt relieved, thinking this whole situation had some explanation. He stood beside a matte black Bentley, which felt completely out of place in that rundown setting. As he approached me, he looked just as confused as I felt. We shook hands, and when I mentioned the construction site, he claimed he was surprised too. He paused for a moment, then suggested we go somewhere else for the interview. He gestured toward the Bentley and told me to get in. Without hesitation, he walked to the driver's side and got inside. I followed, still trying to process everything. As I walked around the car, I took a moment to admire it. Then I glanced into the back seat. Instead of the luxurious interior I expected, I saw something that made my stomach drop. There was a man lying flat on the floor in the back. He was partially hidden in the shadows, holding something long and metallic in his hand. A wave of panic hit me instantly. In that moment, I understood exactly what was happening. This was not an interview. It was a trap. I turned and ran as fast as I could. Behind me, I heard the man shout my name, but I did not look back. Then came the sound I feared most, tires screeching. I glanced over my shoulder and saw the car turning toward me. There was no way I could outrun it. The streets around me felt like a maze with nowhere to hide. My heart was pounding as I reached an intersection. I had to choose a direction. Left was closer, but without thinking, I ran to the right. I sprinted down the road, knowing I only had seconds. Ahead of me, I spotted a building with a fire escape that looked just within reach. Using everything I had, I jumped and grabbed onto the ladder. I had never done anything like that before, but fear pushed me forward. I pulled myself up and kept climbing. The Bentley turned the corner and stopped below me. I could not see the driver clearly, but I knew he was watching. I stayed there, frozen, waiting to see what would happen. After what felt like forever, the car finally drove away and disappeared down the street. I could barely breathe. I called Riley, yelling into the phone as I tried to explain what had just happened. I stayed on that fire escape until he found me. When I got back into his car, neither of us said much. We just drove away in silence. After that day, I tried to push the whole thing out of my mind. I avoided talking about it, even with Riley. As far as I was concerned, it was something I wanted to forget completely. But no matter how much I tried, there are moments like this when every detail comes rushing back. And I cannot help but think about how close I came to that being the last day of my life. This took place during my first year of college, back in 2019. I have graduated since then, but the memory still crosses my mind quite often. During the week of Halloween, my campus turned into chaos with parties happening every single night. I went to a Big Ten school, so fraternity costume parties were everywhere, and even the local bars expected people to show up dressed up. The atmosphere always got intense. There was a lot of alcohol, a lot of police presence, and a lot of unforgettable moments. This particular incident happened on the Saturday of that week. Our football team had just pulled off a huge win earlier that day, and my friends and I planned to celebrate at a specific fraternity house off campus. We knew about the party because one of my friends, Alexandra, was dating a player on the team. We arrived at the frat house around 11 at night, and things escalated quickly. People were getting drunk fast, shouting chants about the team we had just beaten, while loud music filled the house. I was taking shots and dancing with my friends, having a great time. One important detail is that my phone had died earlier, so I had handed it to Alexandra to keep in her purse. At some point, I told my friends I needed to use the bathroom and asked them to wait for me near the DJ booth. By then, all of us were pretty intoxicated. While I was in the bathroom, I suddenly heard someone in the house yell cops as loudly as possible. Immediately, people began screaming and rushing out of the house in every direction. I ran out of the frat house and saw several police cars with flashing lights. People were scattering everywhere. Some officers were speaking with the frat members, while others were chasing underage students. In my drunken state, I realized I did not have my phone. I started shouting my friends' names while trying to avoid the police. After a few moments, it became clear I would not find them in that chaos, so I decided to head back to my dorm, even though I was not completely sure how to get there. The frat house was located far from campus in an unfamiliar area. I began walking, and it was freezing outside. Even though it was only October, the temperature was around 37 degrees. I was still tipsy, but aware of my surroundings. After walking for a while, I felt like I needed to stop somewhere to warm up and collect myself. I noticed a building that looked like one of the academic halls I had heard about, so I walked up, opened the door, and went inside. The interior was quite dark, but a few exit signs cast enough light to see around. After about 5 minutes, I started to feel more sober and realized something was wrong. This was not an academic building. It was a warehouse. Even though I felt warmer, a sense of unease settled over me. I walked back to the door I had entered through and tried to open it, but it would not budge. My stomach dropped instantly. If it was locked from the inside, how had I managed to get in? I moved toward another door under an exit sign. When I pushed it open, I expected to step outside, but instead, I entered another section of the building. This room was much smaller and lit by a dim red glow. There was a constant buzzing sound coming from some machine. Chains were hanging from the ceiling, and steam drifted through the air. It looked exactly like something out of a horror movie. I turned to go back, but the door I had just come through was now locked as well. Panic hit me hard, and I struggled to keep myself from completely breaking down. I slid down against the wall and sat there quietly, trying not to cry out loud. Then I heard it. A door slammed somewhere in the building, followed by footsteps. I froze immediately, my eyes wide. Another door shut, and the footsteps continued, getting closer. Right next to me was another door. As quietly as I could, I opened it and slipped through. Inside, I had to move carefully through the hanging chains and thick steam. I heard the previous door open and the footsteps coming closer. They were heavy and deliberate. My survival instinct kicked in, and I spotted a window nearby. With everything I had, I kicked it over and over until it shattered. That was when I heard the footsteps speed up toward me. I knew I only had seconds. I climbed through the broken window without thinking, only to realize too late that it was a high drop on the other side. I fell about 10 feet, landing on top of 2 recycling bins. The impact shocked me, but I forced myself up and looked back at the window. It was broken, but no one was visible yet. I quickly ran under some nearby pine trees and hid in the darkness. When I looked back again, I saw a figure standing at the window, scanning the area as if searching for me. My entire body went cold with fear. Moving as quietly as possible, I crossed the street and then ran. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I finally recognized the area near my dorm. When I got there, my friends were outside waiting for me, completely panicked. They told me I had been missing for nearly 4 hours. The next day, I told them everything that had happened. They listened in silence, shocked by what I described. Later, I found out that the building I had entered had been abandoned for several years. That realization made my stomach drop all over again. Whoever had been inside was not police or security. It was just some unknown person. To this day, it still makes me feel sick. If I had not stayed quiet or acted quickly, I might not have made it out alive. I tried to look into it afterward, but I never found any answers. It remains the most terrifying experience I have ever had. This is a recent story that's still unfolding. My family and I drove to my college to help me move in, since I'm a first-year student. When we got there, I learned I'd be staying in a Jack and Jill setup, meaning 2 rooms share 1 bathroom. Basically, I would be living with 3 other guys. I already knew one of the guys in the other room. We met during orientation and became somewhat familiar with each other. His roommate is not important to this story. The person I need to talk about is my roommate, Demora. Before moving in, we exchanged social media and basic info. I tried reaching out to him on Instagram to get to know him a bit, but his responses were short and uninterested. On top of that, his profile gave off the vibe of those stereotypical Discord mod types you see in Reels or TikTok videos. When I finally met him in person, he honestly matched that image, except he was skinny and about my height. He had very pale skin and a faint mustache. I tried talking to him again face to face. The way he spoke was just like how he texted, awkward and distant. He stuttered a lot and seemed eager to end conversations as quickly as possible. I attempted to break the ice by asking what kind of music he liked, but he told me he didn't listen to music because it would not fill his sense of emptiness. That already felt strange, but things got worse when he set up his PS5 and immediately started playing. It is not the fact that he games that bothered me. It is how he behaves while gaming. Demora makes these odd grunting sounds, shakes his body aggressively, and laughs while spamming buttons on the controller. He sometimes puts his feet inside his desk cabinet and grabs them, pulling them close while shaking. He whispers to himself, whether he is playing alone or with friends online, and he repeats what he says in a quiet, giggly tone. He stays in the room almost all the time and rarely seems to do any schoolwork. Just his movements alone were enough to make me uneasy when I tried to sleep. But that was only part of it. During the first week, I went out with some people I met in the dorm and came back late, around 1 in the morning. Demora looked like he was asleep, so I kept the lights off. When I walked over to my cabinet next to my bed, I suddenly felt chills run down my arm and had the urge to turn around, so I did. Demora was staring directly at me with a faint grin on his face. I jumped and said something like, "What the hell? Why are you looking at me like that?" He just laughed and said, "Dark time," then turned to face the wall again. This happened about 3 more times after that. I tried to switch rooms, but the college told me there were no openings. I even asked about moving into the other room, but one of the roommates refused to switch. So I was stuck with him for the semester and had to deal with it. Around 3 months passed, and one day I came back from my English class. When I opened the door, Demora stood up suddenly and asked why I was back so early. That confused me because my class had actually ended late. I asked if he wanted the room to himself, but he said no, while striking a weird pose like something out of an anime, saying I should not worry about anything. I cringed at that, and it only made me feel more uncomfortable. I noticed a box on his desk, and when I asked about it, he brushed it off and said it was nothing important. I let it go. Then I realized my iPhone charger and my scissors were missing. I asked him if he had seen them, and he admitted he had. He handed me the scissors, and while giving me the charger, the cable accidentally knocked the box over toward me. The box opened, and what I saw made my stomach drop. A sticky note with my name on it fell out. Along with it was a clear case. Inside were eyelashes, a pair of glasses, one of my socks, and a disposable photo of me that I had taken as a joke before. He quickly picked everything up and started trying to explain, but I told him to get out immediately. He left without arguing. I messaged my Raya about everything. He told me he was out at the moment, but to show him the box the next day as proof so they could take action. I took the box and hid it in my laundry bin. I felt shaken and honestly disgusted by my roommate. About an hour later, Demora came back. I told him to stay on his side and not speak to me. After that, we said nothing to each other. I tried to stay awake because I was worried he might look for the box, but I had a long day and ended up falling asleep around 2 in the morning. When I woke up, Demora was gone, which felt like a relief at first. Then I remembered the box. I checked my laundry bin and it was gone. I panicked. Not long after, my area knocked on the door. I let him in and explained everything. He believed me, but said without the box there was no solid proof, so he could not take action based on my word alone. I felt like I was going insane. The RA left, and about 5 hours later, Demora returned. I asked him what he did with the box. He acted confused and said he had no idea what I was talking about. I kept pushing him to stop pretending, but he continued denying everything. I could not stand being around him anymore. Now it is the second semester, and I am still stuck living with Demora. He told me he would never do something like that again, and that if he ever did, he would admit it, and we would both move out. I accepted that, and we are still roommates. Even now, I avoid being in the room as much as possible. He still makes me uneasy. The worst part is that I struggle to sleep and focus because I keep thinking about that box. Why did he take my photo? Why did he keep my sock? What was the point of the glasses? And the thing that scares me the most every time I think about it is those eyelashes. And maybe the strangest detail of all, he had labeled the box with my name.